function calling, executing, or invoking, whatever is your name for it. You cannot write a program without it. But did you know there are several different ways how to execute a function in JavaScript? In this video, I will be sharing 7 different function invocation patterns in JavaScript. Hi and welcome. My name is Robin Pokorny and I like to write JavaScript. I also like to read JavaScript and I like to talk JavaScript. And that's what I'm going to do today. The topic for this session is function invocation or function calling or whatever you want to call that. There are several ways how to achieve that in JavaScript. I will be going through 7 of them I found and I will list the differences. The differences generally come into this cat pattern. That means it's either context, attributes, or timing. I call it timing. We will get to it. Well, great. Let's start with number 1. That is basic calling. That happens when you just call a function. You declare a function and you immediately call it. It can be called inside another function or it can be run in a global scope. What it means is that if we are in strict mode, the context for this function is going to be undefined. The arguments, you pass them in a bracket. That's very common here. It's very difficult to invoke a function without brackets. Remember that. And timing, well, the function is executed immediately. Number 2, object method. When you use a dot notation before the function name, it's referred to as a method. Several examples could be some array.map or console.log. When you use this, the object preceding the function is then passed as a context to this function. What it means is that if you set some array.map, the map function will operate on this array. The arguments are defined the same way, and again, the function is executed immediately. Number 3, we have 2 brothers, call and apply, and we have also there a distant cousin called the bind. Right? What does it mean? These 2 functions are actually methods on functions, right? Because a function in JavaScript is also an object and it can have methods defined on it. That means we can run function.apply and we can pass arguments and then the function gets executed. What is good about that is that with this you can define the context. So the first argument of the apply and call is the context and it slightly differs what is next. So the next thing you pass is always arguments. In apply you pass it as an array. In call you pass it as different arguments. That's the only difference. You can remember apply for array. Why is that useful? This allows for dynamic arguments. Maybe you receive an array, you somehow change it, and then you want to pass this as arguments to another function. This is exactly what apply allows for. However, now in modern JavaScript, we probably use a spread operator for that. Another thing you can achieve with this is that you can use a function which is meant for some other structures for different structures. For example, array prototype map is a function that usually runs on arrays, but using call, you can call this method on strings. Number 4, the new keyword. This is a very special thing in JavaScript and it works no like any other language, so be careful about that. What it essentially does is that when you call a function with new before it, it will create a new object. It will pass this new object as context to this function and return it when you somehow mutate this object. Please note that an arrow function is not possible to be executed using a new keyword. So if you try to invoke array function, a row function of course. If you try to invoke a row function with a new keyword, you will get function is not a constructor error. Be careful about that because it might currently work since arrow functions can be transpiled to normal functions using Babel or such tool. 5. Array prototype map and friends. There are exactly 9 and soon to be 10 methods in JavaScript which allow for this pattern. It's map, filter, reduce, reduce right, find index, sum, every, for each, and soon to be flat map. These 10 functions are very special in JavaScript. What they allow is that you pass a callback to them, and then the callback is executed on each item of the array. That means when I talk about the cat system, the attributes for this function are kind of set by the definition of the function, meaning for map, you will receive 3 arguments. For reduce, you will receive 4 arguments, and it's up to you what you do with them. The context, and it makes this function extremely special in JavaScript, can be set. It's not very known, but the last argument of this function can be the context. When we talk about timing, the cat thing, that's where this one is very different, because the function is invoked many times depending on the number of items in array and how this function works. So for example, for find, it can be called less than number of items in array. Why I talk about this is that this is a normal callback pattern, and you see it so many times in, for example, Node or even some browsers or libraries use this very often. But in pure built-in functions, this is very unique, and that's why I talk about that. Number 6, 2 functions, set timeout and set interval. These functions are again very, very special. If we go through our cat scheme, cat, the context is usually, it's taken out of context of where you call set timeout. It means that the function, unless it has a bound context, will be called with undefined in strict mode. What is more interesting is the last thing, and that's timing. These are probably the only functions in JavaScript which allows to schedule something in the future. So the call of that function is somehow postponed. That's very new. Attributes, the middle thing of cat. Again, this is not very well known, but if you call set timeout, the first argument is the function, the second argument is the timeout in a millisecond, and anything after that will be passed as arguments to the functions. You can even have multiple of them. And the same applies for set interval. It's a very useful thing. Small warning, set timeout with time 0 does not mean it gets executed immediately. Because of how JavaScript works, this is probably delayed and can cause some problems if you use that, unless you know what you're doing. Number 7, Tekt templates. Templates are a rather new thing in JavaScript. Those are the things with enclosed with backticks. You might have seen that. It's gaining popularity. What I also saw is people started using Tekt templates. Tekt templates means that you precede the backticks with a function name, and then the function gets called with some arguments. You will receive the whole string, all the variables you use into that. I believe one of the famous examples of this is styled components and some are libraries. It's very useful, and as I said, you get the function executed. I believe that the original idea is a little bit different, but you can sometimes use that. One thing I kind of like is that you can invoke join with these. What it means, you can write some array, dot join, backticks, and write the string you want to concat the attributes with. I'm not saying to use that, but it seems like an interesting way how to do that. For our cat, the context here is probably undefined. Attributes are kind of defined by the string you pass to it, and you can be very creative with that. And the timing, well, it's only run once. So these were the 7 function invocation patterns I like. I don't say you necessarily have to use all of them, but I believe it's useful to know about them and use them in appropriate places. I hope you found this useful, and if you have, please hit the like button. If you have any comments or suggestions for the next topics, write them below and I will answer them. For more videos like these, consider subscribing. I'm Robin and I like to write JavaScript. See you next time.